Welcome back to PoliticallyX. I'm your host, and this is the show where we dive into the political topics that define our era, the current events shifting the landscape, and the conspiracies, real or imagined, that circulate in the shadows of the mainstream narrative. Today, we are stepping into a case that has just completely captured the nation's attention.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere right now.
Right. We're looking at the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk and the impending trial of the suspect, Tyler Robinson.
And it's fascinating because so much of the public debate is pivoting on, like, one incredibly tiny detail.
Exactly. I mean, imagine a piece of mangled metal-like, no bigger than a pebble, holding the power to either anchor a high-profile murder conviction or totally unravel the prosecution's entire narrative.
Yeah, that's exactly the situation we're in.
So today we're doing a deep dive into how a single word, the word inconclusive, which was buried inside a leaked government document, basically ignited a massive political controversy overnight.
It really is a phenomenal example of what happens when a highly specific scientific term gets, dragged out of the laboratory and thrown right into the hyper-partisan arena of public opinion.
Oh, for sure. Because usually when we talk about forensic science in a courtroom setting, there's this baseline expectation of absolute clinical precision.
Right, like on TV.
Yeah. Like if an investigator runs a sample through a mass spectrometer or sequences a full DNA profile from a drop of blood, the readout is definitive. The numbers align, the chemical composition matches, and the expert just confidently tells the jury they have their answer.
We've definitely been conditioned to view forensics as binary. Like, a sample is either a definitive match to the suspect or it belongs to someone else entirely. It's a very comforting way to view the justice system.
But stepping into the world of forensic ballistics means leaving that definitive diagnostic landscape behind. Because the physics of a shooting, especially a high-velocity rifle shooting, are incredibly chaotic.
Extremely chaotic.
And that brings us to the core of today's deep dives. We have a stack of primary sources detailing a recently leaked ATF ballistics report regarding the rifle allegedly tied to Tyler Robinson.
Right.
So our mission today is to cut through the viral noise, look at the actual mechanics of forensic ballistics, and understand what an inconclusive finding fundamentally means for this trial.
But before we go any further, I want to explicitly remind you, the listener, of our boundaries for this analysis.
Always important to do.
Definitely. Look, we are dealing with a politically charged assassination. Commentators across the political spectrum have incredibly strong, often polarized opinions on this case. Our goal today is to impartially unpack the factual findings in the source material.
Right. We are not endorsing any political narrative here.
Exactly. Nor are we taking sides on the broader societal debates surrounding this tragedy. We are simply here to help you understand the mechanics of the forensic evidence.
Okay, so let's trace the origin of this specific controversy. Because over the past few weeks, it feels like everyone on social media has suddenly become an armchair firearms examiner.
Oh, tell me about it. It's everywhere.
Right. So the spark was lit by a couple of recent court filings in Utah. On March 27th, Tyler Robinson's defense team submitted a document to the court stating that the ATF was, and I'm quoting here, unable to identify the bullet recovered at autopsy to the rifle allegedly tied to Mr. Robinson.
And that defense filing didn't just emerge from a vacuum. It was actually building on an earlier document from March 10th.
Okay, what was that one?
So lawyers representing various news media organizations were pushing for public disclosure of the case files. And in their filing, they quoted directly from a still unreleased ATF report.
Okay.
Yeah. And that report detailed a comparison between a bullet jacket fragment recovered during the autopsy and the rifle recovered by investigators. The official ATF determination for that comparison was listed as inconclusive.
And as soon as that specific word hit the public record, the media ecosystem just went into overdrive.
Oh, completely.
Just looking impartially at the headlines from our sources, on March 30th, the Daily Mail published this massive banner headline explicitly claiming the bullet, quote, did not match the rifle allegedly used by Robinson.
Wow. Yeah, they jumped right to that.
Right to it. And following that, high-profile conservative commentators like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Candace Owens, they immediately spotlighted the report. They framed this leak as a massive revelation, heavily suggesting that an inconclusive report essentially exonerates Robinson, or, at the very minimum, proves the public is being lied to about the basic facts of the killing.
You see this phenomenon so frequently. When a complex technical term is injected directly into the political bloodstream, it morphs instantly.
It really does.
In the laboratory, inconclusive is just a statement about the physical condition of the evidence. But on social media, it translates instantly to the government has the wrong gun.
But let's be real for a second, though. If highly trained government scientists at the ATF release a report and their ultimate conclusion is inconclusive, it's kind of logical for a layperson to assume the state failed to match the weapon.
I mean, I get why people think that.
Right, like if a crime lab can't definitively place my car at a crime scene based on a blurry security video, the baseline assumption is that you cannot prove it was my car. So why is it wrong for the public to jump to that exact same conclusion here?
It is a completely understandable assumption, but it's a massive misread of how firearms examiners actually operate.
Okay, how so?
To answer that, we really should look at how the prosecution team is handling the fallout. Christopher Ballard, he's a spokesperson for the Utah County Attorney's Office, and on the prosecution team, he addressed this head-on.
What did he say?
He stated unequivocally that when a bullet fragment analysis comes back as inconclusive, it absolutely does not mean the rifle didn't fire the bullet.
Okay, then what is the actual working definition of the term for the ATF? If it doesn't mean mismatch, what does it mean?
It means there simply aren't enough microscopic marks left on that specific, heavily damaged piece of metal to make a definitive ruling one way or the other.
So it's just too damaged.
Exactly. The fragment is too warped or too small to speak clearly, so making the leap from this fragment is too damaged to read to the suspect is definitively exonerated is just fundamentally flawed logic. To say the bullet did not match is scientifically incorrect.
Okay, so since the government is explicitly stating that inconclusive does not mean a mismatch, we need to look at the mechanical reality of what happens when a rifle fires. How does an ATF examiner even attempt to link a fired bullet back to a specific weapon in the first place?
Well, it relies entirely on the concept of microscopic signatures. Bernard Zapper, a retired ATF special agent in charge, explains in our sources that the mechanical process of discharging a firearm leaves completely unique marks on the ammunition.
Right, because of the pressure.
Yeah, the intense pressure forces the metal of the ammunition against the internal components of the gun, and that leaves distinct impressions on the shell casing, the primer, and of course, the projectile itself.
And we are specifically talking about the internal rifling of the barrel here.
Right.
Because for an audience that follows true crime, we know barrels aren't just smooth tubes.
No, not at all. They are engineered with spiral grooves. Those grooves grip the bullet as it travels down the barrel, basically forcing it to spin.
Which provides aerodynamic stability.
Exactly. But because those grooves are machined into hard steel and the bullet is made of softer metals like lead and copper, the barrel essentially scrapes the sides of the bullet as it exits.
Okay.
And this leaves what examiners call striations, tiny microscopic scratches all along the sides of the projectile.
But the ATF can't just look at the mangled bullet from the autopsy under a microscope and guess what gun it came from, right?
Yeah.
They need a baseline.
Oh, totally. They have to conduct a test fire. So they take the suspect's rifle, the one allegedly tied to Robinson, they load it with identical ammunition, and they fire it into a specialized recovery system. Usually that's a large tank of water.
A water tank? Really?
Yeah. The water acts as a gentle brake. It rapidly decelerates the bullet without crushing it against a hard surface.
That makes sense.
So the examiner then retrieves this pristine, perfectly intact bullet that features the exact microscopic striations produced by that specific rifle. Then they place that pristine test bullet and the damaged crime scene bullet side by side under a comparison microscope to see if the scratch patterns align.
But in the Robinson case, the examiner couldn't line them up. The report came back inconclusive.
Right.
And Stephanie Walcott, an assistant professor at Virginia Commonwealth University's Department of Forensic Science, points out something deeply counterintuitive in our sources. She notes that an inconclusive result is actually very common when dealing with rifle bullets.
Which surprises a lot of people.
Yeah. Why would the pinnacle of government forensics frequently fail to get a read on a rifle round?
It is entirely due to the extreme physics involved. We're talking high energy and high velocity. A standard rifle bullet is traveling at an immense speed, often well over 2,000 feet per second.
Which is incredibly fast.
And it carries a massive amount of kinetic energy. When a projectile moving at that velocity strikes a target, especially flesh and bone, the impact causes catastrophic physical damage.
Right.
But that damage goes both ways. The bullet doesn't just pass through cleanly. The kinetic energy forces the bullet itself to mushroom, to fragment, and just violently tear apart.
Okay, so you are essentially asking an examiner to find microscopic hairline scratches on a piece of metal that just went through the physical equivalent of a high-speed train crash.
That is exactly what you're asking them to do. And that is why Walcott says this is so common. The bullet jacket fragment recovered during the autopsy might just be a twisted sliver of copper. It could be stretched, flattened, or simply too small for the examiner to find enough consecutive intact striations to confidently align it with the pristine test bullet.
Let's try to reframe this to make sure we are grasping the core insight here. Think of the markings on a bullet as a complex barcode.
Okay, I like that analogy.
So you have the broad macro-level format of the barcode, say the overall shape and width of the lines.
Right.
Then you have the micro-level data, the tiny, unique imperfections inside those lines. When a bullet hits a target at rifle velocities, the tiny micro-level imperfections get completely mangled and scraped away.
Yeah, obliterated.
But, and I think this is the most critical technical detail in our sources, if the broader macro-level format of the barcode was entirely wrong, the system would immediately reject it.
Yes, that is the vital nuance that completely dismantles the viral narrative right there. Stephanie Walcott emphasizes this point heavily. For an ATF examiner to even place a bullet into the inconclusive category, the broad macro-level rifling specifications must be consistent with the suspect's firearm.
Okay, so they have to match on a basic level first.
Exactly. In forensic terms, these are called class characteristics.
So when you say the broad specifications are consistent, you mean the fundamental architecture of the barrel. Like, if the suspect's rifle has a barrel with 5 grooves that twist to the right,
then the fragment recovered from the autopsy must clearly show the remnants of a 5-groove right-hand twist pattern.
exactly.
Right. If the fragment showed a 6-groove left-hand twist, it wouldn't be inconclusive at all.
Not at all. It would be an immediate, definitive elimination. The ATF would state conclusively that the rifle did not fire the bullet.
Oh, wow.
So the very fact that this report says inconclusive confirms that the fragment crossed the first major hurdle. The macro-level class characteristics matched Robinson's rifle.
That's huge.
It is. It was only the micro-level unique scratches, the individual characteristics that were too damaged by the high-velocity impact to confirm it, was that specific rifle to the exclusion of all others on Earth. That drastically changes how you read those social media posts. It is not a mismatch. The fragments simply didn't possess enough intact microscopic data to cross the incredibly strict finish line of absolute certainty.
Exactly. And the ATF operates under a highly rigorous, very conservative scientific threshold. Bernard Zapor notes that ATF firearms examiners are required to find a minimum of 2 points of confirmation.
Oh, so they can't just find one scratch and be done?
No, they cannot just find one overlapping scratch and call it a day. They must identify at least 2 separate distinct striation patterns that perfectly align. And furthermore, they do not work in isolation.
What do you mean?
A preliminary finding of a match typically requires a second independent ballistics examiner to review the microscopic analysis and formally agree with the initial findings.
Okay, so because the standard for a definitive match is so incredibly high, and because high-velocity impacts physically destroy the necessary evidence, inconclusive results are basically the standard operating reality.
They really are. In fact, we have a 2022 study in our sources involving 79 professional firearm and toolmark examiners. It found that, on average, they report an inconclusive finding in 20% of their casework calls.
Wait, 20%?
Yes. 1 in 5 forensic ballistics tests ends exactly like the Tyler Robinson report.
That's wild.
It is an expected outcome of the diagnostic process, not a sudden unraveling of a criminal investigation.
Right, so if the physical bullet fragment is a mangled, unreadable mess of metal, the prosecution obviously cannot build their case around it. But they have to pivot to the surrounding environment and the totality of the circumstances.
Which they have.
Yeah, we need to look at what else the prosecution is relying on, because high-profile murder trials rarely hinge on a single, ambiguous piece of scraped copper.
Very true. And the state of Utah's charging documents paint a much broader and, frankly, far more severe evidentiary landscape against Tyler Robinson. When you look at the forensic and behavioral evidence collected, the inconclusive bullet fragment becomes a very small piece of a much larger puzzle.
So let's run through the specifics detailed in those charging documents, because it's a mountain of material. First off, Robinson surrendered to police at the Washington County Sheriff's Office on September 11th, which was the day after the killing.
Right.
But the physical forensic evidence is where the case really solidifies. We're talking about extensive DNA evidence.
And we are not just talking about, like, a stray hair found in a hallway. We are talking about touch DNA on the specific mechanical tools of the crime.
Yeah. According to the documents, Robinson's DNA was found practically everywhere on the weapon system. It was located on the rifle's trigger. It was found on various other functional parts of the weapon. It was found on the fired cartridge casing left behind at the scene.
Which is huge.
And it was on 2 out of the 3 unfired cartridges recovered. Plus, his DNA was heavily present on the towel used to wrap and conceal the rifle.
And, you know, the location of that DNA is vital for the prosecution. Getting a DNA profile from a towel is one thing. I mean, a towel can be casually handled or brushed against. But extracting a profile from the grooved texture of a rifle's trigger, that implies a firm, sweaty grip. It implies an intentional mechanical action.
That makes a lot of sense.
And finding DNA on the fired casing and the unfired cartridges suggests the suspect was manually handling the ammunition, like applying physical pressure to press those rounds into the magazine. That is active operational contact.
And moving beyond the passive physical forensics, the charging documents highlight aggressive behavioral evidence too. The state alleges that Robinson explicitly instructed his roommate to delete text messages he had sent regarding Kirk's killing.
That's a massive red flag.
Right. Furthermore, he explicitly told the roommate to avoid talking to the police. Instructing someone to destroy digital evidence moves us from passive physical presence to active consciousness of guilt.
And honestly, the attempt to conceal evidence is often more compelling to a jury than the forensic science itself. It speaks to the mindset and intent of the suspect in the immediate aftermath of the event.
So if the state has a firm DNA grip on the trigger, DNA on the specific casing that held the bullet, and active instructions to destroy text messages, the defense strategy becomes incredibly transparent.
It really does.
Putting a megaphone to one inconclusive bullet fragment seems almost like a purposeful distraction tactic. If you are the defense attorney and you are staring down a mountain of DNA and deleted texts, you have to find a wedge. You leverage that one scientific ambiguity to infect the rest of the rock-solid evidence with doubt.
Exactly. It is a textbook criminal defense strategy heavily reliant on what is often called the CSI effect.
Oh, right, where people expect TV science.
Exactly. Juries have been conditioned by television and movies to expect perfect, infallible science every single time. So when a defense attorney stands up and points to an official government report that says inconclusive, they are exploiting that expectation. They are hoping the jury looks at the ambiguity of the bullet and begins to assume the DNA analysis or the witness testimony might be equally flawed. They use the limits of ballistics physics to cast a shadow over the entire investigation.
And Stephanie Walcott summarizes this reality perfectly in our sources. She acknowledges that forensic analysis rarely provides a neat, cinematic resolution to every single question. Regarding the ATF report, she says, "This definitely leaves the question of the bullet open with no clear answer, which can be frustrating, but the evidence is what it is."
Right. Investigators and juries cannot look at a scratched bullet fragment in a vacuum. If a person is found standing next to a broken window, holding a stolen watch, with their DNA on the glass, and they are caught on tape asking a friend to lie for them, the fact that the police can't perfectly match their shoe print to the dirt outside doesn't suddenly exonerate them.
That's a great way to put it.
The inconclusive shoe print is just one piece of a much larger mosaic of guilt. The totality of the circumstances carries the weight.
So to distill our core takeaways for you from today's deep dive, when you encounter a viral headline screaming that an inconclusive ballistics report exonerates a suspect or definitively proves the government has the wrong weapon, you now understand the physical mechanics that prove otherwise.
Right.
In the realm of high-velocity rifle ballistics, an inconclusive finding is frequently the norm, not the exception. The massive kinetic energy of the impact violently erases the microscopic scratches necessary for a definitive match. Yet, for a bullet to even be labeled inconclusive, its macro-level rifling architecture must perfectly align with the suspect's weapon.
Exactly. If the basic format didn't match, the bullet would be immediately eliminated.
This case really serves as a vital reminder to be a highly critical consumer of information. When highly technical scientific terminology collides with the fast-paced, emotionally charged world of political media, nuance is usually the first casualty.
Definitely. Before you accept or share a narrative claiming a forensic report unravels a case, it is so crucial to understand the actual scientific definitions and the physical limitations of the evidence being tested.
And while the defense team will undoubtedly continue to highlight this deformed piece of copper, the trial of Tyler Robinson is going to pivot heavily on the totality of the evidence. The jury will have to weigh the limitations of ballistics against the stark reality of DNA on the trigger, DNA on the spent casing, and the behavioral evidence of attempting to silence a witness and destroy text messages.
Because focusing exclusively on the one test that failed to yield a perfect result can easily blind you to the overwhelming context of the tests that succeeded.
Right. But I want to leave you with a final provocative thought from our sources to mull over as this trial approaches.
Oh, this is a really interesting detail.
It really is. According to the defense team's filings, the prosecution has indicated that the FBI is stepping in to conduct a secondary, entirely different type of test known as bullet-lead analysis. So if the physics failed because the microscopic scratches were violently erased by the impact, chemistry might actually succeed. Bullet-lead analysis doesn't look at scratches. It involves testing the exact elemental alloy of the lead fragment itself.
Right, they look at the chemical composition.
Exactly. We are talking about analyzing the specific trace metals mixed into the lead at the manufacturing plant. If the FBI can match the chemical signature of that mangled autopsy fragment to the specific chemical batch of the unfired cartridges found with Robinson's DNA on them, the physical scratches no longer matter.
That's incredible.
Chemistry could render the entire debate over the physical deformation completely irrelevant. It is a fascinating potential twist in this complex diagnostic landscape.
Definitely something to watch.
Keep an eye out for that FBI chemistry report as the Tyler Robinson trial unfolds. Until next time, keep diving deep.